screen.
Yes, sir. Hello?
Yes. Yes, I'm looking at your...
Where is my... yeah. Am I audible to you?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hello? Yeah.
Yes,
good morning, my dear students. And today is a lecture on arthropod-borne diseases. And for this lecture, Professor Madhavi from Usman University, head of the Department of Zoology, has been invited, and she has openly agreed to deliver a lecture. And for this purpose, we have been trying our best for having a series of webinars from Monday onwards to Saturday. And it has become fruitful because of all admins, right from Professor Sita Ramarao Garu, Vice Chancellor, and A.V.N. Reddy, and Director Academic Professor Ganta Chakrapani, and finally Professor Pushpa Chakrapani Madam, who is the Dean for Science Faculty. And all have extended their fullest support for this wonderful program. But the only painful thing is students are very bleak. Out of thousands of students, only a few, not even 100. Day before yesterday, it was 72 to 73 touched. Yesterday, being a holiday, you could have joined, but no one has joined, and the strength was only 23, 24. So, however, I welcome Professor Madhavi, who is a very young and energetic faculty member in Usman University, and she is associated with me for writing many books published by Telugu Academy, Government of Telangana, and she is very good worker in research, and she has done a lot of work and published so many papers in reputed journals, and she has a very good credit of getting various awards from various institutions for her academic work, and she is an example for women empowerment. And Madhavi, I request you to take over the charge to start the lecture.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir. A very good afternoon to Professor G. Pushpa Chakrapani, Head Department of Zoology, Dean Faculty of Sciences, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, Jubilee Hills, Hyderabad. I can say my guru and my mentor, Dr. Ponna Srinivasarao Garu, who is really, you're all blessed to have such a great person working there for all your this thing. So I congratulate sir, and I thankful to Dr. Srinivas sir and Dr. Kishore Mendam, who is Assistant Professor Contract at the Department of Zoology. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. My dear students, as already pointed out by sir, I am presently the department of this prestigious centenary department, as well as Centenary University of Usmania University, as well as director for Ronald Ross Institute of Parasitology. So in this connection, due to the lot of this disease prevalence in and around India, as well as in our state, as well as other countries around the world, I thought that this topic would be very much apt, which is also related for our syllabus, that is arthropod-borne diseases. Without wasting much of the time, I just directly jump into the subject. Is my screen visible? Yeah. So arthropods form a major group of diseases vectors like mosquitoes, flies, sandflies, lice, fleas, ticks, and mites that transmit a huge number of diseases. So we know that number of diseases like, the malaria, filariasis, and different types of yellow fevers, etc., are all the major group of diseases. And for this, vectors are responsible. And these vectors are completely hematophagous, which feed on the blood at some or all stages of the life. And these particular vectors are really causing lot of hindrance to the mankind. So when you take this particular vectors there of viral, bacterial, parasitic, rickettsial, and spirochetal, viral being the yellow fever, encephalitis, dengue fever, and Rift Valley fever, they all come under the viral fevers. And bacterial is the plague, and parasitic is malarial, filariasis, and leishmaniasis. And rickettsial is the typhus and Q fever. And relapsing fever comes under this spirochetal fevers. And this arthropod-borne viral hemorrhagic diseases. So these are the acute febrile diseases with the extensive external and as well as the internal hemorrhage, usually serious and may be associated with shock and liver damage. For all these will have the liver damage with high case of fatality. And the most important of these fevers are the yellow fever, dengue fever, Rift Valley fever, and West Nile fever. Now coming to the first one, yellow fever, my dear students, this is very, very dangerous disease that is now at present, even today, it is more endemic at African regions. So a communicable arthropod-borne viral hemorrhagic quarantable acute disease of short duration and varying severity. The causative agent is yellow fever virus, and you can see this is completely endemic in Africa. So you can see this is the Africa continent where you can see it is completely endemic. Endemic means it is only confined to one region. Pandemic ante complete throughout the world. If it is spreading the disease, it is pandemic. Can you give me the example of pandemic disease? Anybody? Corona, is it not? COVID or coronavirus is completely pandemic, is it not? So that was completely throughout the globe. Now, whereas this endemic are only confined to one region, the best example is yellow fever belt. We call that as yellow fever belt because it is endemic in Africa and South America, and also in the zones of different regions. Here we can see the between 15 degrees north and 100 degrees south latitude of the equator. Now, how Egypt is protected from yellow fever? Absence of yellow fever in Egypt and its complete rarity in other regions or other areas such as Eastern Africa. Despite this spread of this particular disease, as you can see, it is completely the vector Aedes aegypti, maybe due to the complete cross immunity from other flaviviruses, that is dengue, West Nile, Japanese encephalitis, and in the populations which may be providing an ecological barrier. Now, what are the reservoirs of this yellow fever? The sylvatic or the jungle yellow fever, the main reservoir in forest areas is vertebrates other than the humans, mainly the monkeys and the vectors. In the forest mosquitoes, these are completely homologous species, and humans has no essential role in transmission of this particular yellow fever. The sylvatic is a scientific term referring to the diseases or pathogens which are affecting only wild animals. That is, sylvan means the correct meaning is the forest dwelling animals. So the word sylvatic is also simply a synonym for the sylvan of the forest. So yellow urban fever reservoir is human and the vector is Aedes aegypti mosquitoes. So this is this particular vector for yellow fever. This is Aedes aegypti. And the period of communicability is no man-to-man transmission, and the blood of man is infective to mosquito shortly during the late incubation period and during the first 3 to 5 days of the disease. So in mosquitoes, after biting an infected person, there is 9 to 12 days extrinsic period, and this incubation period, then the mosquito becomes infective, and this is also called as a trans-ovarian transmission. So urban yellow fever, the mode of transmission, it is by the bite of the infective female Aedes aegypti mosquitoes, and this jungle yellow fever bite of several species of the genus Hemogogus, and the incubation period is 3 to 10 days. So this is how the transmission of this flaviviridae or the virus, this is actually a zoonotic virus, and when the mosquito bites, this particular transmission occurs, and this is how the disease is being spreading. So the susceptibility and resistance is all ages and both sexes are susceptible, and immunity is infection is followed by absolute immunity. Second attacks are unknown, and the transient passive immunity or infant to immune mothers occurs for up to 6, and also the occupation is usually the woodcutters and the hunters. Here, when you see the cycle of transmission, when an Aedes aegypti bites, the incubation period is 3 to 10 days. Symptoms like influenza, hepatitis, you can see the yellow eyes becomes yellow in color, and hemorrhagic illness, and death rate is from 20 to 50%. Now, what are the different clinical features? The mild form is a sudden onset or the FHMA, chills, muscle pain, prostration, nausea, and vomiting. The Faggot sign is a slow pulse out of proportion of elevated temperatures, and jaundice is moderate early in the disease and intensified later. The albuminuria or anuria may occur, and this causes the leukopenia. So most of the manifestations resolve after 5 to 7 days. After a brief remission of hours to a day, some cases progress to severe form, and they have liver and the renal failures. The completely liver will be damaged, and the fatality rate of jaundiced cases may reach to 20 to 50%. Now, when you see this particular figure here, you can see a man suffering with red eyes, fever, completely headache, bleeding from the nose, having vomiting sensations and also vomitings. Eyes are completely yellow in color, muscle aches, hepatomegaly, that is the enlargement of the liver. And what are the diagnoses? Isolation of virus from the blood by inoculation of suckling mice, mosquito, or cell culture. ELISA is the test for viral antigen in the blood, and PCR viral genome in the blood and the liver tissues. So serologic diagnosis, specific IgM in the early sera or rise in the titer of the specific antibodies. Now, prevention and control is the development of vaccine of 17D vaccine. If you take this vaccine, you will get that protection, and personal protective measures are very, very important. Having the personal hygiene and maintaining the cleanliness. So how to prevent the such kind of yellow fevers? There are two types. First is general, and second is human protection against mosquitoes. The general is environmental sanitation, eradication or control of Aedes aegypti, anti-larval or anti-pupal measures, anti-adult measures. Jungle mosquitoes should be impractical, and the second prevention is human protection against mosquitoes using protective clothing, bed nets, repellents, and the most importantly, health education must be advocated, and awareness about the modes of transmission should be given to the public. And the individual measures for the control of mosquito bites is all taking all the different types of mosquito repellents. And when you see this specific one, the immunization is active immunization. Most effective preventive measure is against taking this 17D vaccine, that is a live attenuated vaccine, non-virulent strain cultivated on the chick embryo, and subsequently freeze-dried vaccine is stored at -25 degrees centigrade. And single dosage is enough, and 0.5 ml of SC injection, and 99% of immunities international health regulation considered this particular 17D vaccine effectiveness to start after 10 days and persist for 10 years, and then re-immunization is required. So no or minimal reaction is the first, the vaccine is associated with encephalitis, and it is given to the international travelers who are coming or going to the endemic countries. Ante evaraina Africa nunchi, from Africa to our India, or from India to Africa, if I'm considering our own country. If they go to some other countries, so that kind of international travelers coming and going, there should be a check. And since 1989, WHO has recommended that at a risk of countries in Africa that fall in endemic belt should incorporate into their routine childhood immunization program after 6 months. Very recently, my dear students, I was invited by this APHO. This is, the health organization, different types of airport health organization people. So they have conducted an international conference very recently, some 10 days before, and they have invited me for a keynote speaker and asked me to train 45 doctors and 40 paramedical staff. So there I have given a lecture on this particular yellow fever, how to, check this particular international who are just coming, travelers who are coming and going from the endemic countries, and whether they have got this vaccination certificate or not. So all these conditions will apply for them. And when you talk about this DACA vaccine, it is live attenuated neurotropic virus. It is produced in the mouse brain and it is administered by the cutaneous scarification. It is not approved by WHO or international use as it leads to encephalitis. Now this is the Stamaril, that is yellow fever vaccine. This is also live attenuated. And this particular yellow fever vaccine is YF-Vax, that is being given to different types of people not getting, that is a precautionary measure. And what are the international measures? It is one of the quarantinable disease, and following the measures that should be done to prevent the introduction of yellow fever from the endemic area. That we call it as yellow fever belt. I told you in the beginning, no? And this into the receptive area. That is areas that are free of yellow fever, but the vector is present and the population is completely susceptible. That is, you can take the example of Egypt. And this particular international measures notification within 24 hours by government, by WHO. And this valid vaccination certificate is required from all the international travelers, including the children coming from or going to this endemic areas, which we call as yellow fever belt. So the validity starts 10 days after primo vaccination and lasts for 10 years. The validity starts on the same day after revaccination and lasts for 10 years. And if no certificate is available, traveler who is there, he has to be isolated for 6 days from the date of leaving this particular endemic area. And if the traveler arrives before 10 days of vaccination, that is a certificate which is not valid yet, and the traveler is isolated until certificate becomes valid or until the end of international incubation program that is calculated from the date of leaving the last endemic area. And the traveler is quarantined in mosquito-proof accommodation in the airport. This certificate is required by many countries, which including the Egypt. And this particular disinfection of any aircraft leaving an endemic area for receptive area by aerosol sprays of suitable insecticide that should shortly before departure and also on arrival. So this quarantine of imported monkeys is also very important. Now, dear students, you can see this is the YF vaccination certificate, which we call as yellow fever vaccination certificate. It looks like this. This is an international certificate of vaccination that should be taken but when they are coming from this yellow fever belt. Now that is about yellow fever. That is the first arthropod-borne disease. And the second one is the dengue fever. Dengue fever is the second important arthropod-borne disease that is commonly called as break-bone fever. So this is communicable arthropod-borne viral acute febrile disease of short duration and varying severity. It is endemic in South Asia. And dengue 1, 2, 3, 4 are now endemic in Africa. In recent years, outbreaks of dengue fever has occurred on east coast of Africa from Mozambique to Ethiopia to Saudi Arabia. So you can see these yellow colors are areas which are infested with the Aedes aegypti. And red colors are areas with Aedes aegypti and dengue epidemic activity. So India is completely emerged. Can you see, my dear students? And this is actually taken from this CDC, that is a community. This is the Center for Disease Control, which is ICMR recognized center. So the causative agent is viruses of the dengue fever 1, 2, 3, and 4 types. And the reservoirs are man-mosquito cycle in the tropical urban centers. A monkey mosquito cycle may severe as a reservoir in South Asia and West Africa. And what about the modes of transmission? It is bite of the infective Aedes aegypti mosquito. When you see this dengue fever, a potentially lethal disease that affects 50 million people per year, and it is transmitted through the bites of the female Aedes aegypti mosquito. As I told you, this is also a virus fever. 4 distinct but related viruses which causes the dengue. One is recovery from one gives the lifelong immunity to that particular strain. And the second infection by one of the different strains can lead to dengue hemorrhagic fever, DHV, which has 2.5% mortality rate. So this is the life cycle of Aedes mosquitoes, which we are culturing in our laboratory. Now my lab, actually, we are more concentrating, as I belong to an entomology, completely research. We are more concentrating now on the mosquito research. I've got near about dozen students, and many of them, more than 50%, are working on mosquitoes, different neglected species, and also on the Culex quinquefasciatus also. So you can see all the different masses here. These are the egg transformed into the larvae and next to pupa, and we can see this is the life cycle of Aedes aegypti. And the dengue transmission, you can see it is uninfected mosquitoes. When it bites, you know what it happens? Mosquito feeds on the human infected with the dengue virus, and extrinsic incubation period is 8 to 10 days. And infected mosquito feeds on the uninfected humans. So the clinical pictures is the sudden onset of the fever for 3 to 5 days, and intense headache, rash, yearly generalized erythema, and maculopapular rash. And minor bleeding is epistaxis, gum bleeding, and petachia, generalized bleeding, and lymphadenopathy. So these are the different dengue symptoms. With high fever, when a person is suffering with the dengue fever, they will have high fever, lot of headache, muscle and joint pains, pain behind the eyes, and the skin rashes, vomiting, bleeding from the mouth and noses. So these are all the symptoms of dengue fever, which can be categorized as 3 categories: febrile phase, critical phase, and recovery phase. Febrile phase is sudden onset fever, headache, mouth and nose bleeding, muscle and joint pains, vomiting, rash, and diarrhea. Whereas the critical phase includes hypotension, pleural effusion, that is in the problem in the lungs, and ascites, gastrointestinal bleedings, that all occurs in the critical phase. Whereas in the recovery phase, altered levels of consciousness, seizures, and itching, and slow heart rate. So these are all the symptoms of dengue fever with mild and severe symptoms. So the manifestations of dengue virus infection without symptoms and with symptoms, it has been categorized the dengue virus infection. And this with symptoms includes no different from other fever, and dengue fever, DF we call as a syndrome, and DHF is a dengue hemorrhage fever. And this DF syndromes includes without hemorrhage and with unusual hemorrhage. And dengue hemorrhagic fevers includes no shock and dengue shock syndrome. And when you see the prevention and control, environmental sanitation is very important, as well as the health education. So our houses must be cleaned, and the hygiene has to be followed. So environmental protection, you should not see that water is stored. Even if you keep these tires also, here also the unused tires will have the rainwater or some kind of this deposits of water, and there the complete 1 spoon of water is enough for the mosquito to complete its life cycle. You just imagine. So this is how it is very, very dangerous. So which buzz has more bite, whether Anopheles mosquito or Aedes mosquito? So now that was about the dengue fever. And then now the third one is the third arthropod-borne disease is the Zika virus. This is also a viral fever. And this Zika virus, you can see the complete countries on the globe which are affecting with yellow color. We can see the Mexico, Brazil in South America, and in South Africa, Angola, Kenya, and some parts of Somalia, Egypt, and completely India is merged with this particular Zika virus, as well as Pakistan, Nepal, and also some parts of Bangladesh, Indonesia, and some parts of the Singapore, and also other countries. So researchers think that this Zika might be behind the rise of this microcephaly. Now, what are the symptoms of this microcephaly? They have the seizures in the brain. They have a very small head size, Sorry, the coordination is very difficult. They have a very short stature, dwarfism, and backward sloping forehead, and hyperactivity, and facial distortions, and delays in the speech and the movement. So that is about the Zika virus. And the fourth one is a Rift Valley fever. So this is Rift Valley fever. It is communicable arthropod-borne viral zoonotic disease. It was introduced to Egypt from East and South Africa in 1977, which is causing the outbreak in animals that was transmitted to man. Now, what are the reservoirs is cattle, sheep, and goats. And the mode of transmission is bite of some infective Aedes and Culex species that are handling diseased animals and their tissues. So there are three types of cycles. That is a sylvatic cycle, domestic cycle, and human cycle. In the sylvatic cycle, it is from the trans-ovarial transmission, that is from wildlife, and from domestic, it is from the domestic animals, and human cycle, it is zoonosis. So this is the Rift Valley fever. Red color you can see, ma. They are the major epidemics, and yellow color is the countries which are at risk, and the red color arrow is showing the extension of this Rift Valley fever. So you can see these are all the aborted animals from the infected cow that are with RVF. Now this clinical picture says that this disease is usually mild and self-limited fever. Influenza, like, picture of FHMA and recovery. And severe cases show hemorrhagic fever, liver necrosis, damage of retina, and encephalitis that is also causing that may be fatal. Now, how to prevent and control such diseases? The measures for animal reservoir is prevention and control in animals, vaccination, and eradication or control of mosquito vector, and measures for the man, that is human protection against mosquitoes. And the next arthropod disease is viral encephalitis. So this is an endemic disease in different parts of the world. And this West Nile virus encephalitis occurs in Africa and Middle East countries. And Middle East USA also you can see, as well as the West USA. And Japanese B encephalitis in Japan, Korea, Philippines, and also in India. So West Nile virus transmission cycle, it is entering India through our 7 sister states. That is from the, Assam or some parts of Meghalaya and Arunachal Pradesh. So this West Nile fever virus is from the mosquito as well as the bird reservoir host. These are acting as the vectors, and sometimes even incidental infections from these horses also. So this is a specific arbovirus, and mostly by mosquitoes and some by the ticks. But in Egypt, West Nile virus is transmitted by the Culex species, like, Culex quinquefasciatus or some other species of Culex are also responsible for the transmission of West Nile virus. Now, how to prevent is eradication or control of the vector, and protection of man from the vectors, and quarantine measures for imported birds and animals. So what are the other viral hemorrhagic fevers? So they include the Lassa fever, Marburg disease, and Ebola virus disease. So these are highly fatal and manifested by the hemorrhagic maculopapular rash and bleeding from all other orifices of the body in case of Ebola virus disease. So this is actually an outbreak movie about Ebola in 1995. And this Ebola Zomba says some kind of this thing. And this Ebola virus ecology and transmission includes, this is actually Ebola virus is a zoonotic disease that involves animals as well as humans. So this animal to animal transmission, they may be over by the spillover events, and also the human to human transmission and different types of the survivors for this Ebola virus. So eating the bushmeat, the bushmeat is behind the outbreak. And Ebola virus typical path through a human being, the first symptoms 7 to 9 days, day 10 sudden high fever, vomiting, day 11 will be the brain damage, bleeding from the nose and mouth and anus, and final stages is day 12, lot of consciousness, seizures, massive internal bleeding, and ultimately going to the death. Now, the next arthropod-borne disease is typhus. So, what is typhus? Typhus is an endemic tick-borne disease. This is also trans-ovarial transmission, and it occurs only during the poor hygienic conditions. So, it is of epidemic typhus or loose-borne typhus, epidemic typhus or Brill-Zinnizus typhus, and this is the lice. The causative agent for typhus is Rickettsia prowazzi, and the vector is human body louse. Incubation period is 5 to 21 days, and mortality is 10 to 30% in untreated cases. And the symptoms include severe headache, chills, generalized myalgia, high fever, vomitings, and lacks of consciousness. Causative organism is Rickettsia, and the reservoir of infection is the vector louse, that is Pediculus humanus. And the modes of transmission is contamination of the skin with the pieces of infected louse and inhalation of dried feces. And the clinical pictures of incubation is 12 to 14 days, and skin rashes appears on the 5th day on the folds of the axilla and also on the anterior parts of the forearm and then to the trunk and the back. And these particular complications include the bronchopneumonia and the thrombotic changes, the gangrenes of the fingers, toes, and genitalia. And how to diagnose this particular disease? By the agglutination tests. So these are the figures. You can see when infected, it is completely eaten away from the body. Now, how to prevent this particular disease? So, community development, health education, personal cleanliness is very, very important. And the measures against this particular disease should be always, that providing washing facilities, delousing is very, very important. Washing and dusting with suitable insecticides, specific prevention. Typhus vaccine is there. That is Madrid E-typhus vaccine. That is a single IM dose immunity for 5 years. So this is all about the typhus, and the control is isolation in the hospital after dusting and treatment by the tetracycline 500 grams for every 6 hours for 7 days. Epidemic measures is delousing of confined groups and underdeveloped communities by washing facilities and dusting. Vaccination of the high-risk groups is important, and searching for the source of infection. That was about that particular type. Now the epidemic. Now endemic typhus or flea-borne typhus. It is by the Rickettsia typhi. You can see this particular diagram we have got from scanning electron microscope SEM. This is a depiction of a flea. So what is a vector? It is rats. So that is why it is called as a rat flea. Infection occurs after rat flea bite. Murine typhus is an under-recognized entity as it is often confused with a viral illness. And most people who are infected do not realize that they have bitten by the fleas. And the causative organism is Mosaic, and the infection is rat, and vector is the rat flea. And the modes of transmission is contamination of skin with pieces of infective fleas. And the incubation period is 8 to 14 days, which resembles the mild epidemic typhus. So this is how the skin looks with lot of blisters on the body, reddish or pinkish color blisters. And the last one is the Q fever. What is this Q fever? This is the query fever. It is for the query because when described, its etiology was unknown. That is the reason it is called as Q fever, an acute infectious disease caused by the rickettsial organism Coccinella bruni. It affects a variety of animals, but unlike other rickettsial disease, it is not transmitted to the humans through an insect vector. So the acute febrile rickettsial disease with minimal clinical infestations form of atypical pneumonia. And this agent is Coxella brunet, which is an organism which has an unusual stability. It survives adverse physical conditions such as dryness and pasteurization and many disinfectants. But when you see this particular reservoirs, they are the ticks, human body, lice, small wild animals or mammals like, the cattle, sheep, goats, birds, and man. And the period of communicability is direct transmission from person to person. Now, the modes of transmission is a direct contact with the domestic animals, and airborne, that is dust contaminated by the placental tissues, and ingestion of the raw milk is actually the main mode of transmission, and the transconjunctival and from person to person. And here you can see the entry, the spread, the disease as well as the exit in this particular figure. Entry from the aerosol from the infected sheep, goats or cattle, and hematogenous through the blood, and diseases like pneumonitis, endocarditis and granulomas. Exit is usually none in the man. So the case presentation of incubation is 14 to 21 days. Onset of headache, weakness and severe sweats. And pneumonitis is found in the x-rays. Spontaneous recovery is very common. And diagnosis is by this particular serological test. And the control is by the preventive measures, animal control, health education, and immunization, that is vaccine by Q34. So this QVax is a vaccine against the Q fevers. Okay, and the next is the relapsing fever. So relapsing fever is caused by the ticks. This is another important arthropod-borne infection which is implicated arthropod by the body louse and the ticks. So relapsing fever is tick-borne endemic relapsing fever, TBRF. It is a zoonosis transmitted principally from rodents to humans by the bite of various soft ticks. And the second category is the louse-borne epidemic relapsing fever, LBRF. It is a disease of humans that is transmitted from one person to another by the body louse. So it is characterized by the recurrent acute episodes of the spirochetemia and the fever altering with variable periods of transmission. So this relapsing fever, you can see the complete, it is endemic in all these parts of this pinkish red in color throughout the globe except Australia and Greenland. And this tick-borne relapsing fever is before feeding and after feeding you can see. So before feeding it is completely, the brown or a soil color. But when it is after feeding, it will take away the blood. So it will be very much reddish in color or pink. And it is due to the infection with Borrelia jejuni. And the reservoir for this particular agent, the agent is Spirochetes Borrelia jejuni. And reservoir is, it affects the rodents. And period of communicability is ticks remain infective for several years and they pass infection transovarily to their progeny. And the bite or the coxal fluid of an infected tick is the mode of transmission. So incubation period, periods of fever lasting 2 to 9 days, and bronchitis, nerve palsiasis, and hematosplenomegaly, and renal fevers occurs, and fatality rate is 2 to 10%. See, this is how the body will be affected. When you see the blood of this particular patients infected with this fever, so the blood film shows circulating Borrelia jejuni and the specimen must be taken during the febrile attack. Now, how to control this particular disease is control of ticks and rodents by benzene hexachloride, BHC, or dieldrin to prevent the ticks from infesting the human habitations. The cracks and proper housing constructions are very important, and protection of this particular are susceptible. So use of personal protection is important, and the chemoprophylaxis with the tetracycline after exposure is used when risk of acquiring the infection is very high. Now the last one is the LBRF, that is louse-borne relapsing fever. It is by the spirochetal disease caused by Borrelia recurrentis and transmitted by the human louse. It is by the gram-negative spirulite, that is the Borrelia recurrentis, and man is the only reservoir. And the period of communicability is 4 to 5 days. And this blood form an infected person and remains ineffective, or it is for a life or 20 to 40 days. And the case presentation of incubation period is 2 to 10 days, and with hyperpyrexia, hypotension and cardiac failures can be fatal. And diagnosis is blood should be taken during febrile periods and examined by the dark ground illumination or stained blood films. And the intraperitoneal inoculation or culture in the lab animals can be used to recover the spirochetes. And controlling measures is delousing using the residual insecticide powder, protection of the susceptible use of repellents and protective clothing. Also, the chemoprophylaxis with the tetracycline after exposure is used when the risk of acquiring the infection is very high. And the international measures as and when notified by the WHO. Okay. And the next is the filariasis or the Bancroftian filariasis. This is completely endemic in many tropical and subtropical countries like Africa, Asia, Western Pacific, and parts of America. Filariasis is caused by, Buccaria bancrofti, and the female, it's a nematode. It is a female worms produce the microfilaria that reaches the bloodstream 6 to 12 months after infection. And microfilaria appears in large number during the night with maximum density in the blood between 10 to 2, that is nocturnal periodicity. And the human with microfilaria in their blood man is the definitive host and mosquito is intermediate host. And the period of communicability, humans can infect mosquito when microfilaria is present in the peripheral blood. And modes of transmission is bites of this Culex pipens is Anopheles gambia and Aedes. Microfilaria penetrates the stomach wall of the insects and develops in the thoracic muscles into an elongated infective filariform larva that migrates to the proboscis. So when mosquito bites an individual larvae, they can enter punctured skin, then passes via lymphatic where they molt and become the adult. So this is the Aedes mosquito, this is Culex pipens, and this is the Anopheles mosquito. So these are the 3 different species of mosquitoes which are acting as vectors and transmitting so many dangerous fevers or the spreading of the diseases. So you can see the conditions here, how the Culex quinquefasciatus breeding sites, dirty water in the blocked drains, cesspits, etc. And this is how Boda Kalo antamada. So this is how the lymphodenopathy is being observed. So you can see the attack of this particular filariasis. This is the normal leg and this is the completely infected leg. So how to specific mass drug administration? So this World Health Organization recommends for this MDA and also DEC plus albendazole is very, very important. That has to be taken. And the control, as we have to elimination of lymphatic filariasis in Egypt was taken as a big program, and that is how it has been eliminated. Now in India, I can say this has been eliminated, and the different diseases like leishmaniasis, and because of the constraint of time, I was asked to be only 45 minutes presentation. So this is the different types of leishmaniasis: cutaneous leishmaniasis, Leishmania tropica. This is mucocutaneous leishmaniasis. This is Leishmania braziliensis, visceral leishmaniasis, that is Kala Azar. In many of the African countries, you see this particular diseases. And the last but not the least, very, very, very important is malaria. This is a parasitic re-emerging diseases. It is seen in the tropical and subtropical regions. And the causative agent is Plasmodium vivax, Falciparum, ovale, and malaria. These are asexual and sexual phases. This is how the mosquito bites and takes the blood. The period of communicability is, it may reach up to 3 years, and it has got mosquito stage as well as a erythrocytic cycle stage that is been occurring both in man and in the mosquitoes. Malaria transmission cycle is by the infected RBC cells. They directly go to the mosquitoes will take, and again second infected person. Plasmodium, in the plasmodium we see the gametocytes. first infected mosquito and then the liver infection. And the incubation period is 9 to 40 days. And the susceptibilities, all are susceptible, and there is no natural immunity. Actually, all the researchers are, doing a lot of research in order to take or, discover some kind of malarial vaccines against the particular mosquito bites. So these are all the different ring stages, the cyjoints and gametocyte stages, and the prevention is better than cure. It's always there. And the malaria survey, different mapping sites, population characteristics, study of vectors, choosing suitable representative samples, and the taking the parasitic index, and the World Malaria Day. When it is? It is April 25th. That has been marked throughout the world for this malaria eradication. And to eradicate malaria in certain area, 4 phases have been done. That is preparatory phase, attack phase, surveillance system, and consolidation system. So in the preparatory phase, preparation, planning, surveying to study the vector and what is the magnitude of the problem. And attack phase, complete coverage of the area by insecticides. And surveillance system is early findings or treatment with the fluoroquinine. And consolidation phases, insecticides are stopped and continue with the preventive and radical treatment. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you. Dr. Srinivasan. Yes, Kishore. Your voice is mute. We cannot hear you, Kishore. Cannot hear you.
Is it hard?
We cannot hear you, Kishore. Srinivasan? So many thank yous. Thank you, my dear students. Hope you enjoyed my talk. You have come to know about
Service. Hello. 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 Host is not an participant. Madam, you chair, I think.
Madam, hello, can you hear me, madam?
Hello.
Yes, yes. Now hello. I can hear you.
Yeah, madam. Good afternoon, madam.
Good afternoon.
Is it audible, madam?
Yes, yes.
Yes, madam. Thank you, madam. Thank you, madam. Your lectures were. We know that you are expert in entomology, but regarding this previous lecture and this lecture also wonderful. We thank you very much, madam. At the same time, our students they got very benefited, madam. At the same time, they are asking PPTs, madam. I mean, if it is possible, please send PPTs to share our students. At the same time, we know that you are very busy today. You have some urgent meeting also. Even though you are attending this webinar, you are delivering a lecture. Thank you very much, madam. And thank you very much to participants. And tomorrow and after tomorrow also, we have same webinar series, and we can meet tomorrow. Thank you, and thank you very much, madam.
Can I exit?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, madam.
Thank you.